This is going to be a little different introduction. As you go through life, you meet various people in various stages and seasons of your life that as you find out more about them, you say, wow, tell me more. Tell me more about that. Roy is one of those people in my life. Ginger and I met Roy and his wife, Billy. Billy, could you wave? All right. In a Sunday school class a number of years ago at Germantown Baptist Church. We got to know them as good Christian friends through the years in that class. When I first knew Roy, he was already retired. I knew he was a naval pilot, but that's about all I knew about him. He was executive vice president of a company called Crew Training International. Well, I thought I got that right. And I didn't know at the time why he spent so much time in the NATO countries and in Langley, but now I do. The Crew Training International makes flight simulators. Good, I got that one right. It's kind of hard to read my notes here. In knowing Roy, I didn't get to know him real well through Roy. I got to know his family. He is extremely proud of his family, and rightfully so. His wife, Billy, is an author of several Christian living books, and at the time was a regular speaker at a Christian conference in London. It was an annual Christian conference, if I'm not mistaken. Their daughter actually has been here. Is that right? Okay, she's done, okay. Anybody remember the name Kelly Cash? Okay, a few. Former Miss America, Kelly Cash. Only Miss America from Tennessee? Okay. You can see that she didn't get his look from Billy. She got his look from Billy, not Roy. So, you can see where the looks came from. If you haven't seen Roy, he'll be standing in just a minute. Okay, son, Kerry Cash. He graduated from the Citadel, turned down a professional football contract to join the Navy as a chaplain. You talk about some priorities for a young man. He served with the 1st Marine Division as they drove through Iraq and captured Baghdad. He baptized several Marines in the Saddam Hussein's swimming pool. He wrote a book. The name of the book is A Table in the Presence, about all of the miracles he saw on that drive. If our book baggers are interested, you got a special contact with his parents right over here. So maybe you can get the author sometime to speak. Now, I started learning about Roy. The first thing I remember learning about Roy was that he was in the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola for his number of carrier landings at night. Carrier landings at night? Wow. He was a Top Gun pilot. I thought that was a movie. Can I say outlaw? He was outlaw. Later in his career, he was commander of the Top Gun school. So many different commands that are so impressive that I'm not going to be bringing out. But the next thing I learned about him, he's a country music singer-songwriter. Wait a minute, Top Gun country music singer? Over 100 artists have recorded his songs. We kind of lost track over time. I think they moved first, we moved, changed churches, and we just totally lost track. And Peter asked me if I knew someone that might present a patriotic program. And I said, I did. So Ginger was trying to help me, and all the contact information didn't work. And Ginger did something that Billy saw and told Roy. I think that's the way it worked. And Roy called me one day, and I asked him if he still did any patriotic programs. And he said, "You haven't seen my newest one." I said, "What in the world is it?" He said, "I was able to meet the MiG-21 pilot that I shot down." What? Wow, Roy, another story, and I hadn't even seen him in 15 or more years. Something else there. Just welcome Captain Roy Cash, over 300 combat missions, Silver Star recipient, and so many more medals and ribbons and keepsake.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Just don't move too much.
Need my notes. Top Gun. And let me get this back to the beginning.
There it is. Pretty bad.
Okay, how'd that do? Does that look like Kirby pie? Okay. Well, I thank you very much, John and Peter, for the invitation. It's good to reacquaint ourselves. Like I said, we haven't seen each other in a long, long time, but it's really good to be here. Thank you for the invitation and the coordination efforts. And since it's only 2 days since Veterans Day, I know we have veterans here, right? Veterans?
Yes, we do.
Oh, yeah. I salute you. I would like to acknowledge my wife, Billy. We have been married just over 62 years, so on July 4th coming up, we will celebrate our 63rd wedding anniversary when the nation is celebrating its 250th. And John and Peter both told me that it would be okay if I wear the uniform, but I want to tell you for a fact, the real reason I wear this uniform for things like this is because my wife insists on it. It seems she still can't resist a sailor in uniform. Well, anyway, I'll get into it. Old, retired Navy fighter pilots are usually just relegated to reminiscing at squadron reunions, or swapping sea stories at the officers' club, or bragging about who's the best pilot. It's an argument nobody ever wins because we all think we're the best. And in fact, I find the older I get, the better I used to fly. Anyway,
So cute.
yeah, you can, as my wife would say, you can always tell a fighter pilot, you just can't tell him much. That is a slide that shows a depiction of the briefing slide that was made for me when I took command of Top Gun in 1980. And when I was in command, excuse me, the Secretary of the Navy and a couple of guys from Los Angeles, they didn't even say Hollywood at that time, came down to Top Gun in San Diego. to work on what they called a Navy project. We had no idea what they were talking about. We assumed it would be some sort of documentary, and then a few years later, boom, out comes the movie. So that's what they were talking about, and that's what happened after that. So, I'll get a little bit more into this in a moment, but I'll let you know that about age 8 or 9 or something like that, I knew that I wanted to fly. My dad took me out to Millington. We lived in Lucy. Anybody ever heard of Lucy, Tennessee? Yeah. We lived in Lucy. My dad took me and one of my sisters out to see the Blue Angels. They were flying propeller aircraft at that time, the 8F Bearcat. And when I saw that, what they were doing, I said, Dad, that's what I want to do. So I kept that dream in my head and in my mind and my heart, and eventually made it come true. Like I said, I was probably in the 4th or 5th grade, and that brings to mind an essay written by another 5th grader. You know, when we were in school, teachers would assign a project, write an essay on what you want to be when you grow up. I've done that, I'm sure you have too. Well, this is what that 5-year-old, or that 5th grader wrote. Excuse me, let me get this centered. He said, I want to be a naval aviator when I grow up because it's a fun and easy thing to do. Naval aviators don't need much school. They just have to learn numbers so they can read instruments, and they should be able to read maps so they can find their way if they get lost. Naval aviators should be brave so they won't be scared if it's foggy and they can't see. And if a wing or motor falls off, they should stay calm so they'll know what to do. Naval aviators have to have good eyes so they can see through clouds. And they can't be afraid of thunder or lightning because they're much closer to them than we are. The salary naval aviators make is another thing I like. They make more money than they can spend. Wow. That's because most people think airplane flying is dangerous, except naval aviators don't, because they know how easy it is. There isn't much I don't like, except that girls like naval aviators, and all the stewardesses want to marry them, so they always have to chase them away so they won't bother them. By the way, Billy was not a stewardess. And he ends his essay with this absolute gem. He says, I hope I don't get airsick, because if I do, I couldn't be a naval aviator, and then I would have to get a job and go to work. Well, some of it is fun and exciting, but it can be demanding and dangerous. Apollo 13 commander Jim Lovell once said, most of the time, carrier aviation is more challenging than flying a spacecraft. I'm sure he considered Apollo 13 an exception to that statement. Carrier aviation is often described by us naval aviators as hours and hours of boredom, punctuated by moments of stark terror. I've had a couple. Well, I had some over here too. Thank you very much. I've had a couple of those, and I'll mention one. A moment, it's off. First, a little bit of history on my career. Finished Pensacola flight training in 1963, and Billy and I got married. We were both from Memphis. The families came down from Memphis and got married on July 4th. That was the only day the Navy flight training folks could let me off, so that's the day we got married. It was a Thursday, and they let me have Friday off, so I had a long weekend, and Friday was not an automatic day off back then, at that time. So obviously I studied all weekend, and how I ever passed that aerodynamics test on Monday morning, I'll never know, but I did. Anyway, some of the aircraft I've flown, in case you might be interested, the F-4 primarily, and the F-14, the A-6 Intruder, the A-7 Corsair, the A-4 Skyhawk, F-5 Tiger, that's the one that we flew when I was commanding officer of Top Gun. And I did an Air Force exchange tour at Luke Air Force Base and flew the F-100. And then when I had Top Gun, the Navy sent me down to Carsville Air Force Base to check out the F-16. and I was the first Navy pilot to get to fly the Air Force F-16.
Wow.
And eventually, Top Gun did buy the F-16, and they still have the F-16 as one of their adversary aircraft. Well, as John mentioned, I had a little over 300 combat missions, 305 to be exact, and sometimes I think I can remember every one of them. And I wound up with 1,210 carrier landings like this here, and mostly in the F-4. And I won't go into this much more, but I did get shot down once, so I'm certainly not perfect. Got shot down on Father's Day 1972. What a day to get shot down, huh? In Haiphong Harbor in Vietnam. But I was rescued rather miraculously by helicopter. I was in the water only a few minutes, and all of a sudden I felt a splash of water and wind, and there was a figure in front of me, and I thought at first this must be Jesus Christ or an angel come to take me home. And just suddenly, all of a sudden, it appeared. It was a rescue swimmer with his arms out saying, "Are you okay, Commander?" And I said, yeah, are you okay? What are you doing here? The helicopter was above us, and that was what was causing the spray and the water. And then the helicopter moved away and the spray disappeared, and they did rescue us, picked us up, pulled us out of the water, took me back to the ship. So that was no fun, except it did change my life and my perspective on prayer, because what I had said was, God, if you get me out of this, I'm yours forever. And that's about the time I saw the figure in front of me. Well, I'll tell you about my most memorable mission, and John alluded to it. And it happened like this. That was the final result of it. I shot down a MiG-21 when we were sent into North Vietnam to protect the bombers. The MiGs were trying to shoot down the bombers, and we encountered 4 MiG-21s. We jumped into the middle of them. 2 of them ran for home. They didn't even stay around. And one, I got behind and shot him down, and you can see there in the slide, the MiG-21 going down in flames in the bottom right-hand corner, and if you look real close in the left-hand corner, there's a figure in a parachute. That is the pilot of the MiG-21. Well, we were left there, got back to the ship. We were welcomed aboard pretty much like Tom Cruise was in the original Top Gun. They mobbed us on the flight deck because I had been able to shoot down that MiG. And one of the funny things about the story is, just before I left to go on this mission, I had said to all the guys in the ready room, if I shoot down a MiG-20 or if I shoot down a MiG today, I'm going to quit smoking. Well, they laughed at me and threw erasers and chalk and stuff at me and said, get out of here, outlaw, cash, get out of here. Well, I think God looked at them and then looked down and said, what's this? He answered the kind of elusive prayer that I had said, hoping to get a MiG-21. Well, but again, I thought that must be the end of the story. I shot down a MiG, don't know what happened to it. But then, in 2015 or 16, an agency of the U.S. State Department called the DPAA, Defense POW Accounting Agency, they still go to Vietnam to try to account for missing in action and pick up remains of flyers and others who've been shot down or killed. They started putting names, dates together and connected me and the guy I shot down. And so they put us in contact. This is nearly 50 years after I shot him down. I shot him down on July 10th, 1968, and this is 2017 now. Well, he sent me a photo of himself. Here's the photo he sent. Lieutenant General Pham Thu Thai. He's a mean-looking dude right there, huh? Looks like he's just condemned somebody to a dungeon or something. I sent him a photo of me, and then in September of 2017, the State Department and Vietnam coordinated a symposium in San Diego, California, where we were going to meet the guys that we interacted with. 13 North Vietnamese pilots came over, and we had about 25 or so U.S. Navy, Marine, and Air Force pilots. We all met in a hotel in San Diego. They lined us up, the U.S. folks on one side, and the Vietnamese folks came up. They were on the other side, kind of like a Mexican standoff there for a moment. And then they started introducing us to each other. And the first one introduced was this guy, Lieutenant General Pham Phu Thai, because he wound up being the senior officer in the Vietnamese military. Yeah. And so he was the senior guy there. They introduced him first. He stepped forward, bowed slightly, and said something like, through a translator, "I am honored to meet you, Captain Cash. You are welcome to come to my country if you promise to come unarmed." Had a sense of humor. So I stepped forward and we shook hands. And this picture is the one that was taken maybe 15 minutes after we first met. He doesn't look so mean there, does he? Pham Phu Thai. Met his wife and his son, and we had a good time for the 3 days. We got together, we briefed our missions. He agreed exactly with my briefing of the mission. He didn't try to embellish it at all. Exactly the same way that it happened. And so at the end of it, we toasted each other, and he had the final toast as the senior officer. And he said, "Roy Cash and I were warriors fighting in the air." That's their kind of interpretation of fighter pilot. "And now, today, we are friends for life. And we communicate regularly on the occasion of the anniversary of the shoot down, or our birthdays. And by the way, our birthdays, we both have the same birthday. New Year's Eve, December 31st. How is that for coincidence? The only thing is, he is 10 years younger than me." And one of the things he said in his brief at the end of it was, "Captain Cash, you should consider it no big deal that you shot me down. After all, I was just a kid." And I said, "Well, I'm glad the Department of Justice in the U.S. didn't find out about it, or they may have prosecuted me for assault on a minor." We had a good laugh about that, and we communicate all the time and stay in touch. And he and his son run an insurance company in Hanoi, and they are basically capitalists. They say the government doesn't bother them, they don't bother the government, and they love it. So that led me to conclude about this particular mission and part of my life. As Walt Kelly's famous cartoon character Pogo would say, "We have met the enemy, and he is us in many ways." And that's the way Pham Phu Thai and I feel about it. So, we've become friends. Well, I concluded my career as Deputy Chief of Staff out at Centectra in Wilmington, retired in 1993, and was, like John said, the Vice President of Crew Training International. And a few years ago, I retired from that and stayed on the board of directors for a while. I've been blessed with a wonderful wife, Billy, daughter Kelly, son Kerry, 12 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, and number 7 on the way. And my prayer is that they will continue to enjoy the blessings of liberty enjoyed by our founding fathers. And that's a vision our founding fathers placed on the Liberty Bell. Leviticus 25:10, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." Well, this nation's experiment has survived and prospered from the birth of such ideals with freedom, security, and opportunity for all. But today, some of those dreams and some of those pursuits are being challenged, aren't they? But rather than get political, I'm going to share an allegory. Now it's a story that kind of reflects what life is. And this allegory is about sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. Bill Bennett, who served in the administrations for Ronald Reagan and for George H.W. Bush, in his book, America, the Last Best Hope, he compared the general population of the U.S. to sheep, being protected from wolves by sheepdogs. In other words, we are the sheep, and the evil are the wolves. They're being protected by the military and law enforcement, sheepdogs. Now, sheep has long been a metaphor for people, as you know. The Bible describes us as sheep who have gone astray, the lost sheep, the ultimate sheep, Jesus himself as the Lamb of God. Certainly, given those examples, we should have no problem with mere humans comparing us to sheep. Let me expound on that with a short story. Several years ago, University of Washington voted to commemorate Gregory Pappy Boynton, the infamous World War II U.S. Marine Corps Black Sheep Squadron commander. You may remember the TV series starring the late Robert Conrad as Pappy Boynton. Some University of Washington students objected to that, saying that he was not the right kind of person to represent the school. A member of the Marine Corps is not an example of the sort of person the University of Washington wants to produce. Besides, there are too many monuments at University of Washington already that commemorate rich white men. Well, Pappy was not rich. In fact, he died destitute. And he was not white. He claimed correctly Sioux Indian, Native American ancestry. And Pappy suffered nearly 2 years as a POW of the Japanese and was presented the Medal of Honor after the war by President Truman. Here's what one veteran wrote to the University of Group that scored and rejected military role models. He wrote, "I read of the student activity regarding the proposed memorial to Colonel Boynton, a Medal of Honor winner. Sadly, you may be too young to appreciate the service and sacrifice of generations of servicemen and women on whose shoulders you and your fellow students stand. I assume you simply were not taught to understand and appreciate the service and sacrifice of those who protect your right to such naivete and ignorance." He then referred to Bill Bennett's comparison of the general population and those students to sheep being protected from wolves by sheepdogs. In other words, the populace being protected from terrorists by military and law enforcement. Let me apply that allegory to the world we live in, which may be, by the way, the most violent and dangerous time in our history. And yet, most citizens are decent and capable of hurting each other, except by accident or extreme provocation. In other words, they're sheep. Then there are the wolves. Are there wolves out there who would feed on the flock without mercy? You better believe it. Where there's evil in the world, and some folks are capable of evil deeds. The moment you forget that or pretend it's not so, you become vulnerable sheep. Then there are the sheepdogs. And as military folks, veterans, we are sheepdogs. We live and serve to protect the flock and confront the wolves. If you have no capacity for violence and are a healthy, productive citizen, you're a sheep. If you have a capacity for violence and no empathy for your fellow citizens, then you're defined as a sociopath, a wolf. But if you have a capacity for violence and deep love and concern for your fellow citizens, what do you have? A sheepdog, a warrior, someone who can walk into the heart of darkness and walk out unscathed or sacrifice self for something higher than self. And we know that sheep live in denial, which is what makes them sheep. They don't want to believe there's evil in the world. They can accept the fact that fires happen, which is why they want fire alarms and extinguishers and sprinklers and fire exits in their schools, but many are still outraged at the idea of putting an armed policeman or security officer in their schools. our children are hundreds of times more likely to be seriously injured or killed by school violence than by fire. I mean, when's the last time, if ever, you know of serious injury or something like that from fire in a school? Never have. But the idea of someone coming to harm or kill their child is just too hard to wrap their minds around. So they choose the path of denial and remain sheep. Now the sheep generally don't like the sheepdog. He looks a lot like a wolf. He has fangs and a capacity for violence. The difference, though, is that the sheepdog must not ever harm the sheep. Any sheepdog that does will be punished and removed. The world cannot work any other way, at least not in a representative republic such as ours. Still, the sheepdog disturbs the sheep. He's a constant reminder that there are wolves in the land. They would much rather prefer that he didn't tell them where to go, give them traffic tickets, stand at the ready in our airports and cabbies holding an M16, operate combat systems, or fly fighter jets like I did. The sheep would much rather have the sheepdog cash in his fangs, paint himself white, and go bah. That is until the wolf shows up. And then the entire flock try to hide behind one lonely sheepdog. I'm sure you've seen pictures like that. Now, some people may be destined to be sheep, and others might be genetically primed to be wolves or sheepdogs. But most people can choose which they will be. And I'm proud to say that many Americans choose to become sheepdogs. Here's the point I would emphasize. In nature, sheep, real sheep, are born sheep. Wolves, wolves. And sheepdogs, sheepdogs. They don't have a choice, but we're not critters. As human beings, we can be whatever we want to be. If you want to be a sheep, then you can be a sheep, and that's okay. But you must understand the price you may pay. When the wolf comes, you and your loved ones may suffer if there's not a sheepdog there to protect you. If you want to be a wolf, you can be one. With sheepdogs, they're going to track you, hunt you down, and you'll never have rest, peace, or safety. But if you want to be a sheepdog and walk the warrior's path, then you must make a conscious, moral decision every day to dedicate, equip, and prepare yourself to thrive in that moment when the wolf comes knocking at the door. Now, it's okay to be a sheep, but don't kick the sheepdog like the University of Washington students did. Indeed, the sheepdog may run a little harder, strive to protect a little better, and be fully prepared to pay an ultimate price in battle and spirit if the sheep move from bah to thanks for your service. And by the way, my response to that nowadays is if somebody says thanks for your service, I say, you were worth it. And sometimes that brings people to tears. So try it sometime. Anyway, oh, by the way, the University of Washington finally did erect a memorial to Pappy Boynton and 7 other University of Washington Medal of Honor awardees. Did you get that? The University of Washington has 8 alumni who have been awarded the Medal of Honor. That is the most of any school except for the 2 service academies, West Point and the Naval Academy. And they put up a memorial like this. It stands in the main entranceway to the university, where all those students who didn't want him have to see it every time they walk by. Now we don't ask for a lot as veterans. Like the sheepdog, most of us in the military just like, kind of a soft pat on the head, as long as it doesn't mess up our hair. A smile, a thank you to fill the emotional tank. And when their number, which is what we get for protecting the sheep, and when their number is called by the Almighty and day retreats into night, a small prayer before heaven may be in order to say thanks for letting them be sheep, grateful for the millions of sheepdogs who vanquish the wolves and guarantee the freedom to exercise our rights as Americans. Service above self. That describes sheepdogs, past and present, their service and sacrifice. That service above self has included the ultimate sacrifice for many. It's possible some of you have witnessed the ultimate sacrifice in friends or comrades. You may have been at that point yourself. I know I have. One thing is certain. Those of us who chose to wear the uniform answered two questions that have historically defined the dedication of free men and women in the defense of freedom. If not me, who? And if not now, when? For me, and for you too, I'm sure that service meant defending and ensuring the rights and liberties of all Americans and giving back a little of what this nation under God has given all of us. We are a nation that once was described by Abraham Lincoln as the last best hope of mankind on earth. Still is. But, as Ronald Reagan said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It must be fought for, protected, and handed down, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and grandchildren what it was once like in America when men and women were free. Service and sacrifice, service above self. That defines those who serve, the veteran, and I submit that the veteran is the better of us all. The one who comes closest to that biblical definition of supreme sacrifice in John 15:13 that says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." Service and sacrifice. I think you'll all agree that we could certainly use more of that outside the doors of this facility. As for me, a Navy sheepdog, I served 31 years for God, home and country, took an oath to support and defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and my service as a naval officer and combat fighter pilot was an honor, a privilege. But today, we corporately must resolve to not let anything strip away the freedoms and opportunities unique to our constitutional republic. If our republic is to survive, our rights and freedoms must be balanced with civic responsibility. The Constitution and its veterans, the sheepdogs, who as the legacy of service and sacrifice since 1776 have protected and guaranteed our freedom to so act. Yeah, we have a duty to ensure that service and sacrifice, ours and that of the ones now on guard, shall not have been in vain. Toward that end, I would offer my fervent prayer. Again, it's an honor to be here at Kirby Pines for Post-Veterans Day, honoring those who exemplify service and sacrifice, service above self. Sheepdog. May God protect the sheep. Give the sheepdogs a watchful eye, and may the wolves be vanquished from our shores and from our midst. May God help us keep our republic as our founding fathers intended and envisioned. Indeed, may God bless America again. I'm going to conclude my time here with my rendition of Ragged Old Flag, which I kind of helped Johnny Cash write. He ran it by me. I offered a couple of lines. Then after 9/11, I added a verse, nearly 2 verses. He proved that just before he passed away. It's a tribute to our nation, our flag. It was written to help commemorate our bicentennial in 1976. And in fact, he debuted it to a joint session of Congress on July 4th, 1976, as part of the bicentennial celebration. Billy and I were privileged to be there in the Capitol Gallery to see that, and Johnny stayed with us, for a couple of days over the time there. The Ragged Old Flag is a tribute to our flag and our nation, and especially for those who gave some, and for those who gave all. And it's particularly moving, I think. It's called Ragged Old Flag. I walked through a county courthouse square. On a park bench, an old man was sitting there. I said, your old courthouse is kind of run down. He said, no, it'll do for our little town. I said, but your flagpole is lean a little bit. And that's a ragged old flag you got hanging on it. He said, have a seat. And I sat down. Is this the first time you've been to our little town? I said, I think it is. He said, now I don't like to brag, but we're kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, we got a little hole in that flag there when Washington took it across the Delaware. And it got powder burned the time Francis Scott Key sat watching it writing, say, can you see? You got a little rip in New Orleans with Pickenham and Jackson tugging at it seems. And it almost fell at the Alamo beside the Texas flag. A few waves on, though. It got cut with a sword at Chancellorsville. It got cut again at Shiloh Hill. There was Robert E. Lee, Beauregard, and Bragg. Yeah, the south wind blew hard on that ragged old flag. Flanders Field in World War I, she got a big hole from a Bertha gun. She turned blood red in World War II, but stood strong and proud by the time it was through. She was in Korea, Vietnam. Yeah, she goes where she's sent by her Uncle Sam. While Native Americans, African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, and whites have all shed red blood for those stars and stripes. She flies from our ships upon the briny foam, but you know, they just about quit away from her back here at home. Why, in her own good land, she's been abused, burned, dishonored, denied, refused. And the government for which she stands, scandalized throughout the land. She's good and threadbare, wearing kind of thin. But you know, she's in good shape, for the shape she's in. But she's been through the fire before, and back on 9/11, 3 firefighters raised her from the ashes once more. He paused, wiped a tear away, and said, Mister, we got to thank our God each and every day. All those Americans that fought and died and bought us our freedom and our patriots' pride. So we got to make sure we exercise those rights and stand in allegiance to those stars and stripes. And so we raise her up every morning, bring her down slow at night. We don't let her touch the ground, and we hold her upright. Well, you know, mister, on second thought, I guess I do like to brag. Because you know what? I'm proud of that ragged old flag. Be happy to try to answer them. Any questions?
How old was the young man flying the MiG?
And when I shot him down, believe it or not, he was only 18 years old. I was 28. However, he had been flying, and he had started his training in Russia at the age of 14, and he had almost as many hours in the MiG-21 as I had in the F-4. So he was fairly experienced.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
What was the hardest thing you had to do in your training or as an officer on the carrier?
Landing aboard the carrier at night. Landing aboard the carrier in the daytime is usually easy by that, I mean, because we get very, very good training. But at nighttime, when it's black and all you've got is the lights of the ship and the runway and the, what we call the lens that tells you whether you're on the glide slope or not, if you don't follow those instruments absolutely perfectly, you can wind up getting completely disoriented and landing in the water. So landing aboard a carrier at night is the hardest thing I ever did. And in fact, when we were in combat in 1972, the medical folks came out and they put sensors on us to measure our heart rate and pulse and all this kind of thing when we went into combat. And they found out that our heart rate and pulse and excitement or anxiety level was highest, not in combat, but coming back aboard the ship at night.
Not bad. Oh, yeah.
So that was the hardest thing. Yes, sir.
To follow up on that, I can imagine an Army sniper, he's just laying there prone, shooting at his target. But I can't imagine two planes swaying and you're trying to hit that target that's moving.
Well, the Sidewinder missile, the one I shot down, the Sidewinder missile, what you have to do is get behind him and get what's called a tone. The Sidewinder missile, when it senses a heat source, the exhaust pipe of the jet in front of you, it emits a signal that sounds kind of like this. And if you get outside it, it goes away. So when you've got that tone, that means that the missile is telling you, I'm ready to go. And so I pulled the trigger, and sure enough, the Sidewinder just follows that heat source right up the tailpipe.
Thank you.
By the way, he saw it coming because he ejected. I was watching the aircraft, and he ejected simultaneously with the missile hitting. In other words, he knew he'd been hit. So he ejected. He did break his arm when he landed in the rocks, I found out later, but that healed okay. And he got shot down one other time in 1972 by another Navy guy, don't know exactly who it was, and he survived that. So he was shot down twice.
Wow.
Anything else?
Anyone else? Well, thank you. Appreciate it very much.